Alex here with another video on introducing organizations. The Storey Teller is a media outlet producing digital news for Storey County residents, a county with a population of 4,006 as of 2017. The organization was brought to our attention by supporters and the recent publication Toll versus First Judicial District Court, which clarified that the News Shield statute's protections extend to journalists who inform the public through digital media. We are here with Sam Toll. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what you do at the Storey Teller?
Alex, hey, thanks for having me. I'm a Gold Hill native. I was born in Gold Hill, Nevada. My family actually came to the Comstock Lode in the 1860s. And when I was a kid, my dad published a newspaper that was award-winning and mildly controversial. He pointed out things in Storey County and Lyon County that could have been considered shenanigans. You know, he did reporting. He did a good job of providing news. And as a kid, I remember that experience. It was a lot of fun running around, be a little printer's devil. But I spent a 30-year career in the Sacramento Valley and had a chance to move back home in 2016. And when I did, I began to write some articles for the local paper. I was poised to buy the local paper, and the deal fell through. So I started a website in February of 2017 called the Storey Teller. And basically, my objective was to bring to light some of the things that were going on in Storey County that I felt were not being reported on, that the public didn't know about, and not only to cover community interest stuff, but to focus on the governance, to focus on some of the things that I found to be just completely astonishing happening in broad daylight, and as a result, I've written some very critical articles. I've written some pretty biting satire, and I've written a bunch of different pieces about some of the shenanigans and monkey business that that's going on in plain sight up here in Storey County. In doing so, one of the guys that would come up in my investigative research and in the stories and articles that I pushed was Mustang Ranch brothel owner, Tahoe Reno Industrial Center executive, and Storey County Commissioner Lance Gilman. One of the interesting things here in Storey County is that we're a county of about 4,400 people. I think Mound House right down the road has more people than Storey County in it. About the size of a small little suburb in Reno. But the industrial park has a lot of money. Obviously Tesla moved in 2014. They got their deal. 2015 they set up shop, and have enjoyed some pretty preferable treatment, much of which has been great to Storey County and has benefited the entire community, and much of it has managed to benefit a very few people at the expense of the community, and that's one of the things that I've focused on. I wrote I've written a number of pieces, and literally, I guess, what is it? Today's the 8th, so we're recording this on December 8th. On December 7th, in 2017, I was served with a lawsuit from Mr. Gilman claiming defamation. He cited 8 of the pieces, 8 articles that I had written, and considered them to be defamatory. And that started a long process for me, and has really, I've really been warmed by the support, the generosity of my readers and of the people who have been following the case, both financially and in terms of regular, so calling me up and patting me on the back and shaking my hand when they see me in public. So the the legal process through which my case has wandered has been, in my opinion, and our position is that it's a slap case. It's a it's a
strategic lawsuit against public participation.
Exactly right. Thank you. I was struggling to remember what that stood for, but so basically, for those who don't know, a slap suit is one that is initiated by someone who has means against someone, in most cases, who doesn't have financial means, in order to chill their efforts and to cost them money, tie them up in court, and otherwise frustrate them and keep the work that they're doing from continuing. Happily, I doubled down on my efforts, and so again, there were 8 articles that were listed in the suit initially as defamatory. It's in Storey County. It's in Nevada's first district court. Storey County is part of that, and the Honorable Judge James Wilson, who we have a lot of respect for, has been the judge overseeing this case. I believe, well, it was midway about 2018, in May or so. He made a motion that threw out 7 of the 8 articles or counts, I guess.
You mean an order? The judge entered an order?
Yes, okay. That's correct. I assume so. Not being a lawyer and having had a number of different motions, orders, and gesticulations in this case, I may misspeak about the actual. But nonetheless, he basically said, look, 7 of these articles are not defamatory. However, one of them is potentially defamatory, and he then granted Mr. Gilman limited discovery to determine what he could find out about the last remaining article. The article in question is one that discusses, or that basically, well, I made the mistake of using a declarative statement. I'm not a trained journalist. I didn't go to school to learn journalism. If I had, I would have learned that when you're making a statement about someone, if you make a declarative statement, and you accuse them of something, then you run the risk of being embroiled in a defamatory lawsuit or litigation. And the story that I wrote, that is the remaining story, describes the notion, or calls into question, Mr. Gilman's residence. If you believe the narrative that Mr. Gilman is presenting, he lives in a small double-wide trailer behind the Mustang Ranch brothel with 2 roommates, his girlfriend and another gentleman. And most folks in the county, when I moved back here, all basically just shrugged their shoulders and said, "Yeah, no, we all know he lives in Reno or in Washoe County, but he's got the money, and everybody, in essence, buys the story that he lives in this little double wide behind the Mustang Ranch." Mr. Gilman is one of the most, perhaps one of the more wealthy men in Nevada, certainly in Storey County. And I basically didn't buy the narrative, and did investigative research to conclude that in fact he does live in Washoe County. In the course of doing so, I interviewed a number of individuals whose identity I keep confidential.
Right, which is good.
In the course of the deposition in May of 2018, Mr. Gilman's attorney pointedly asked me about my relationship with certain people in the county, and then asked me what research or methods I used to gather the information that made up the story that I wrote. And, I did a bunch of public records requests, researched Storey County's zoning ordinance, which does not allow people to live at the Mustang Ranch based upon its zoning. It's very odd. The Mustang Ranch is zoned both industrial and agricultural, and even though the title says Mustang Ranch, there's no agriculture going on out there. But nonetheless, my attorney advised me not to answer about a dozen questions that Mr. Gilman's attorney posed, invoking Nevada's reporter shield law. After the 12th time, Mr. Gilman's attorney became very frustrated and abruptly, canceled the deposition and said, "Look, we're going to see you in court. This is ridiculous. You don't deserve to have the protection of the Nevada shield law because you're just a basement blogger, throwing legal material at my client, and whatever." So at that point, Judge Wilson scheduled a hearing. The first time it was scheduled was in, I believe it was November of 2018. Mr. Gilman's attorney had some conflicts that postponed it twice. It was going to be in December, and then it was postponed again until the middle of March of 2019. And surprisingly, about a week before the hearing was scheduled to go down, Mr. Gilman had put forth a number of expert witnesses which were denied. We put forth a number of expert witnesses which were approved, and we were all excited to have our day in court and to be able to argue before Judge Wilson, why it was that I should enjoy protection from Nevada's reporter shield law. And as I mentioned, prior to that hearing, Judge Wilson issued a surprise order, which basically said, in essence, and I'm paraphrasing, but the document is available on my website, and I'm sure you have access to it as well. It basically said that the reporter shield law protects employees of radio stations, of newspapers, and of television stations, and it also protects people who are involved in associations. Now, in his order, he said that because I joined the Nevada Press Association in August of 2017, I was officially anointed or became a reporter by joining the association. But because I was not a member of the Nevada Press Association prior to that, he would allow limited discovery and presumably another deposition and that I had to disclose any sources of information that I got between February of 2017 and August of 2017. So at that point, my attorneys, a couple of just fantastic lawyers, Luke Busby and John Marshall, filed a writ of mandamus with Nevada Supreme Court, saying basically that Judge Wilson did in fact say I was a reporter, a journalist, and did qualify the Storey Teller website as a digital newspaper after August of 2017. But in fact, our argument was that it was a digital newspaper from the day it started, and so that was the argument that we put forth. We also, of course, asked the Supreme Court to rule on our case, and at that point, I think it was a couple of weeks later, the Supreme Court, in fact, took up our case, ordered a halt in the proceedings so that I didn't have to undergo deposition until they had rendered their decision, which they did earlier this week.
So I got quite a few questions. I was gonna go in one direction, but I think since we kind of touched a whole lot on that case, I'll start from there and roll backwards. One of the
Sure.
things that I assumed was that the Nevada Shield law protected me. And I actually didn't know much about your case until maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I think I saw something in the news about
Right.
you were willing to sit in a jail cell rather than disclose who your confidential sources were. And that it made me wonder, just how much protection do people like me and other online media, I guess, sources have in protecting their confidential sources. And one of the things I was wondering is, how astonished were you at the notion that you might have to disclose people who'd confided in you confidential information before? How concerned were you about it before you'd been sued, and did that change sort of after you've been sued?
Well, frankly, I didn't realize, the ramifications of what I was doing, in the sense that, again, I never went to journalism school. I started a communications business in Sacramento, and I ran, I had 75 employees and was doing my own thing down there. But when I got back here to Nevada and began to dabble into journalism, I didn't understand the scope and the nature of, what was possible. What by writing something, a simple sentence, and phrasing it in a way that makes it declarative instead of asking a question.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, you become you open yourself up to potential for the lawsuit that I'm currently embroiled in, and so you know understanding the impact and the severity of what potentially could have happened had I been forced to disclose my sources, both to me personally, but also to people like you, other journalists who don't work for a traditional news source, but in fact do produce information in areas within the market of the free market of ideas that are of interest to people on certain topics. That is journalism. And so, obviously today what is happening is in the way that information is disseminated is nothing like the folks who drafted the Nevada's press shield law in the late 60s and early 70s could have anticipated. So for me, I basically said, well, look, bottom line is that these people confided in me with the understanding that they would remain anonymous. And I have an obligation to them to not break that trust. And I have an obligation to you, Alex, and other journalists who come after me to stand my ground and say, no, this is not right. I disagree with the ruling. And if I am forced to, if I'm compelled to go to another deposition and, an effort is made to reveal my sources, I will run the risk of fines or jail or both,
Right.
rather than betraying that trust of my sources.
Right.
So
I have to say that a case like this one is something that really does inspire confidence in me, not just in the Supreme Court, but also in my ability to continue to protect confidential sources. You can imagine how much more cautious the people are who communicate with me, given that I scrutinize the judiciary. And
right.
unlike you, I mean, I also have no formal journalistic training at all. But what I do have is extensive experience in the courtroom representing myself. Most of it wasn't against the government. Most of it was domestic relations stuff. But it did sort of give me the caution
that it helped me understand what I needed to do, not to just win a lawsuit, but to just avoid one altogether. Just because I'm just a
Right.
guy, I can't
Right.
fund that.
Right.
I can't, and I can represent myself. I've done it before so many times, but it still takes a tremendous amount of sweat. It's work. It's stress. It's even though I'm not funding it with money, I'm still devoting so much time to representing myself. I've already actually had to do this on 4 occasions, with respect to what I do for our Nevada judges. There are definitely attorneys who don't like what I'm doing, and I have to say that some of the people tell me, it's just because you're doing something new, but I think it's got nothing to do with the fact that I'm doing something new. It's got everything to do with the fact that I'm just a guy and I'm tiny. I don't think that attorneys who object to my presence there really like any media presence there at all. Las Vegas Review Journal, Reno Gazette Journal. It's just that because they're so colossal, they're not going to take them on. Whereas if it's just somebody like you or me, we're just an easy target because we're just a guy. So sometimes we get a lot more benefit, I feel, out of precedent like this, whereas other more established media sources, they could just blast somebody, in public, in mainstream media, and cause them tremendous amounts of damage, whereas we end up having to rely on this precedent, these statutes, and these rules, and hopefully the judiciary abiding by the precedents. One of the questions that I had for you was about, um, I think you called it an industrial complex or establishment, something like that. What was it that you referred to?
Oh
Um,
yeah. And before I answer that
Go
question, I
ahead.
will say, Alex, that anyone anyone who is used to operating in the dark or behind closed doors, who is forced to operate in the scrutiny of broad daylight, tends to get annoyed.
Hmm.
They tend to not appreciate the fact that they don't get to operate in their little vacuum.
Right.
Um, Now, do you live in Reno, or are you a Vegas
So
guy?
I was in Reno for quite a while, from 2002 to 2014, and most of my experience in the legal system is in Reno. I do have a little bit in Clark, which is where I came to. Well, that's where I am now, and I've been there
Okay.
since. But yeah, go ahead. Keep going with your question.
So that explains, Alex, why you're not familiar with the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center.
Oh, I'm not.
Yeah, so uh, they like to call it Tri. I call it the land of the merry tricksters. Uh, but in I think 1999, Lance Gilman and Roger Norman purchased a large swath of Storey County, the old McCarran family ranch. Pat McCarran, a former Nevada senator, um, his family ranch was north, or I guess east of Reno, and they purchased that in 1999 and began to develop it as an industrial center. They claim it is the largest industrial center in the world, and in 2014, they and Elon Musk bamboozled the Nevada legislature into granting them what is going to be more than $1.2 billion worth of abatements, tax credits, and other benefits for them to start up the world famous Gigafactory
Hmm.
here in Storey County. And so the the impact of that industrial park in northern Nevada and in Reno has been substantial. There's a lot of discussion. There's been a number of really great articles written about the impact of the industrial park and of Tesla here in northern Nevada. And because it lives in Storey County is adversely affected by the plant. For example, Storey County school system would have enjoyed, since the park started, roughly revenues to the tune of about $230 million. Now, Storey County school system, has 450 kids, so the argument could be made that they would have a hard time spending that money. But the reality is that our schools, our buildings are, run down. The roofs leak. They're having a hard time. They're not desperate financially, but they're certainly not flowing in cash. And so the impact of Tesla and the industrial park just for our schools has been substantial. Similarly, the county, has, on one side of their mouth, they say, hey, we're swimming in cash and we have tons of money. But on the other side, if you look at the budgets, if you do some investigative research, you'll find that, as recently as 2018, fiscal year 17-18, the county's budget was upside down by $1.7 million. The fire department was upside down. And if you look at the impact that the industrial park and Tesla specifically has had on our infrastructure, our fire and police, public safety guys, it's remarkable how much it's cost us. So that is something that I report on, and because I shine the light of sort of having a different narrative as to what's real in Storey County, I get I have to deal with this type of slap lawsuit, which is something that, again, is a tool tried to use to chill me and to shut me up.
One of the reasons I ask is because there's a similar problem in District 6. It's not really identical to the problem you have, but my District 6 coordinator is also in a very small county. It's rural, it's Humboldt, and I guess it's like there's just one large controlling sort of force there. It's the mining industry community, whatever you want to call it. And it seems like you go through a very similar situation in District 1. I'm trying to get some coordinators in District 1 and 3 also. And I was just curious about that. And it does seem to confirm sort of the situations I guess you have to deal with when you're in a place that just kind of has one massive force and everyone else is just sort of microscopic. So I was going to go ahead and wrap it up, but I think you might have some questions for me. So go ahead. I'm here to answer anything.
Well, Alex, you reached out to me. Of course, I was completely unaware of what you do, what you're up to, and spent some time over the last couple of days checking your site out, and was very much impressed with the work that you're doing and how basically how interesting it is. Not everybody finds Nevada's judicial ecosystem interesting, but having been tossed into it, and then looking at what you're doing, I can't help but be impressed at the amount of work that it requires to provide the granular data on each and every judge, all the cases, coming to conclusions as to, hey, in the case of Judge Wilson, I think you've got his error rate at 12%. There's other judges who have substantially greater error rates. And the way that you conclude those errors and discuss them, I think is just a spectacular asset to the community, to Nevada, and to the legal system. And I just want to just basically say, what a great job it is that you're doing, and how much I appreciate it.
Thank you. I very much appreciate the compliment, and well, maybe another time we can talk a little bit more. I didn't want to keep this video sort of under 15-20 minutes, so definitely appreciate you coming on. It was great talking to you, and I will probably see you around.
Alex, I look forward to it. We can follow up once the case has been put to bed.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
As with our previous videos, if you have an organization you'd like us to introduce, or if you have any questions, you can feel free to post them down in the comments below, or send us an email at admin@ournevadajudges.com.